this chapter, we're going to be testing components. It's one of the more challenging ones to test, so let's go ahead and get it out of the way so you can get some core concepts under your belt. I'm going to start with the doggo landing component. It's the most complicated of the components that I've created for this project. As you can see, I've got some stuff injected into the constructor. We're going to have to mock all of that out. We are going to have to mock these methods on the service, and we want to test that everything gets set to what we expect it to be when we run certain functions. When we run this function, we expect that this logic behaves. Same with all of the functions. So let's go into the spec file. The very first thing I'm going to do is run fdescribe. And then let's run npm run test so we can see what happens. It's going to fail. I'll tell you that right now. All right, as I expected, our test failed. Let's go up and look and see what it says. Okay, if app card is an Angular component, then verify that it's part of this module. So we need to bring in the component dependencies that exist in the template, okay? So any custom components that we've made that exist in other modules, we need to import those modules into our spec module. So app card lives inside of the shared module. So I'm going to go into here. As you'll remember, I said we can do anything we can do with normal modules. So I'm going to import the shared module. Okay. Save, and that should solve my problem. Oh, it failed again. Ah, geez. Ah, see, it's erroring on router link right there. So Angular was super nice to us and gave us what's called the router testing module. Anytime you're injecting the router, or if you're using router link, things like that, you will want to just import router testing module from Angular router testing. All right, test should be fixed now, right? Should be good to go. Oh, no, you can see why this gets frustrating, right? Okay, no provider for HTTP client. That means that now we've solved everything in our template, which is great. So we're making progress here. All right, remember how I said we're going to need to mock all the stuff in that we are injecting in the constructor here? All right, it's trying to actually use the service right now is what it looks like to me. So we need to mock out these two things. The reason that we mock everything that gets put in the constructor is this. It's twofold. One, we're not testing the service that's being injected, right? We are only testing the component that we are in right now. We don't care if data service it has some bad logic in it in this file. Data services test file should test whether its logic makes sense. The other reason, we would have to mock all of the dependencies of the service if we directly injected it as well, or we'd have to inject those. And so it can get a lot of layers deep and cause you tons of problems. I can't emphasize this enough. Always mock anything you're injecting in the constructor. Okay. So let me show you the syntax for doing this. Let's mock data service first. First thing we want to do is just make a couple of dummy objects. Let data service equals blank. And let's go ahead and do doggo service while we're in here too. Let doggo service equal blank. Okay. Now, if we wanted to directly provide it, you would be tempted to go, oh, let's just provide the data service. Nope, that's not mocking it, okay? You can't do that. I've also seen people do things like data service equals testbed.get data service. Don't do that. You're not mocking it. It's just injecting it. Okay? Stuff makes me mad. All right. So here's the syntax to mock out a service. We're going to say provide and then give the actual class of the service, data service. Then use value our local variable. Okay. What this is telling it is every time that I try to make a call to data service, I want you to use this mock object. We don't have any methods in there yet, but we'll get there. Okay. Next thing that we're going to want to do is the doggo service. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that now. Provide doggo service. Use value doggo service. Cool. All right, now we've mocked those out. It should throw us an error saying that it doesn't have any methods in there. Okay, so let's save it so we can see what that error looks like there. Remember, fixture.detect changes is running our ng on init. It's trying to run all of that logic. Okay, what does it say? Data service.getDoggos is not a function. Okay, so if we look here, data service.getDoggos is being called. But since it's using this object right here, we need to define get doggos as a property, which is a method, and give it some sort of return value, okay? So we know that this is going to return, this is an HTTP request, so it's going to return an observable. So let's give it an observable. And we're going to need to make some mock data up in order to do it. So let's take a look at this. Since I've typed everything, I know that Doggo API response is the schema. Okay. So I can look at it right here and I can see I'm going to have to make some kind of mock that matches up with this interface. One thing that you can do is use actual data from your backend, copy it. You can console log it out with a JSON stringify, copy it, and then you've got good data that you know is actually real. You can also do it by hand, but I think that's a pain in the butt. So I'm going to copy this for my HTTP request. I don't have a server, so I just did an HTTP request on a local JSON file. It's not a real scenario, but bear with me here. Okay. One thing that we can do is in assets, we can make a mock data file or folder rather. Okay. And let's do mock doggo response.json.ts. I'm going to say export const mock doggo API response. To keep myself honest, I am going to add the interface. All right, equals, boom. Ooh, it's mad about all those quotes, isn't it? It's okay. We don't care about TS-lint rules right now. Let's just get out of here. We've got our mock data now. Let's go back to our spec file. And I want to say return an observable out of mock doggo API response, which we're going to import. The reason to keep it in an external file is you might have multiple components that are calling that service method, and now you've got mock data to share between all of them. It'll save you time. Okay, now we've got that method set up. We need to mock out the other method that is inside of our ng init, which is calculate pats. So let's come in here, calculate pats. Okay, and we don't care what it does. Again, we just care what type of data it's going to return. In this case, it's a number. It's going to take a number as an argument, and then it's going to return a number. So I'm going to need to say calculate pats number. Okay, and then we're going to return just number times 2. Again, we don't care what it does, right? We only care that our component is working. Okay, we've got that. Should run. Let's see. Okay, you can see the test ran. Yay! But that's just creating it. That's just running the basics. That's not actually testing the logic. So let's start with our ng on init. We need to test that this .doggos gets set to the right thing. Total doggos, everything gets set to the right thing. So let's make another it statement. It should initialize. Okay. So I'm going to teach you one thing we haven't talked about yet, which is asynchronous code. So typically with Jasmine, it's not going to run any asynchronous code unless you specifically tell it to. Any services that return observables, things like that, you have to specifically say, hey, I don't only want you to run this code. I want you to run what's inside of it too. The way we're going to do that is by setting our it statement in the fake async zone. Sorry, dramatic effect. Fake async is going to say, hey, some asynchronous code is going to be running here. Expect it. Okay. So we know that, again, after this test and before this one, it's going to reinitialize and rerun that entire lifecycle hook. So we should be good to go. The way that you tell it to go ahead and run that asynchronous code is with a thing called tick. It says run the asynchronous block. Okay, asynchronous block has then been run. We are going to expect this .doggos to have been set to the response.doggos. So we want to say expect component.doggos to equal mock doggo API response dot doggos, right? Because that's what we're returning from the get doggos method. You could do the other statements too. You know, expect component.total doggos to equal mock doggo API response dot total doggos, etc., etc. I'll skip those for now. Pat's currently required has a service method involved in its setting, right? So let's talk about that one just real fast. Okay, expect component dot Pat's currently required to be, and we'll talk about the difference in a second. Okay, so we're passing in response.pat's currently required. Let's find out what that is from our mock data. Okay, go here. 80. Okay, so we're taking that number 80, and based on our mock here, we're multiplying it by 2, so it should be 160. Yay, we're programmers and we can do basic math. Okay, that one should be good. And then we should see that loading got set to false as well. So you would say toBe false. Let me tell you about the difference between toEqual and toBe. toEqual is for complicated things like objects and arrays. Let's say that you had an object, you're trying to compare two objects. One of them has the keys in a different order than the other one. That would fail toBe, but toEqual will allow that to pass. toBe is for simple things, Boolean, strings, numbers, things like that. Now, if you use toEqual here for the 160, it would work still. It would not technically fail your test. It wouldn't be as right as it could be, and being pedantic is awesome. Okay, let's see if these tests will run. Boom. Yes, it's like sweet digital heroin. Okay, so we've tested the ng on a knit block. Why don't we test next doggo and previous doggo? It's basically the same testing, so I'm just going to do next doggo. Okay. The current index, whatever it is, initialized to 0, if it equals doggos.length minus 1, then 0. Otherwise, we're gonna increase the index. This is for the pagination. Okay, so we should test both conditions so that we can be thorough. So let's set up our it should go to the next doggo. Next doggo. Okay, first thing we want to do is set up our conditions. Okay, this is conditional based on this .current index and also this .doggos.length. So I'm going to set up component.doggos to be a length of 2. It's going to get mad at me because it's an incorrect type. I'm going to use typecasting here. Not generally recommended for typical Angular use because you're doing something wrong. In a unit test, I think it's fine. We don't care about what's inside of component.doggos. We just care about its length. So let's just get its length right. Okay. We need to set component.current index to 1 for the first condition. What this is going to do is it's going to loop back to index 0 after we call next. So let's go ahead and do it. Component.next doggo. And we expect component.current index to be 0. Let's do the second condition, which is when we're not at the end of the array. So component current index equals 0. Technically, I don't have to do this, but I like to for clarity. Component.next doggo. We should expect that component.current index. You got to type right. To be 1. Okay, let's see if it runs. Boom! Oh, man. Cool. That's the basics of testing component TypeScript. Again, I haven't talked about testing the native element, the template yet. I'm going to do that when we get into directives. Up next, we'll talk about testing services. Yeah.